how to recreate this file here. What we got here is we have a shot. So we've got a shot of it's a tracking motion. You can see we've got motion in the camera. We've got the blood going against the tree, and blood coming out of his shoulders. And because I also put a bullet shot in the tree there, you can see in the background. And so this will be tracking motion and masking effects, okay, and using some blending effects. Okay, so let's start this project now. Okay, I'm going to create a new project. I have a file already here. I have a couple of comps already. Here's the movie. Here's the video file here. I'll double click on it, and this is the movie file here that we. Oops, not that one. That's the blood burst. This is the one I want. Sorry, I apologize. The wrong file. This is the movie file. So you can see he's just pretending to get shot. Okay. So, and we're going to make it look like he really got shot by putting blood shoot out the back and that. Okay. All right. So let's start this file. Let's create a new project, a new composition. I'm going to create a new composition by grabbing the movie and dragging it over the top of the new composition button, the bottom of my project panel. And what that does, it created a composition that matched the frame rate, the frame size, and the length of this video file. Okay, which is 1 second, 4 frames. Okay, and I think this is a 24 frame thing, so that would be 28 frames. So here we have a little video guy. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is find some blood, and so I just Googled splatter brushes. Okay, I Googled splatter brushes, and let's go to Google. So here they are. Here I Googled splatter, but if you Google splatter brushes in Photoshop, you'll find not pictures of them, but you'll find 1,130,000 different results, and everybody gives away free Photoshop brushes. I mean, they sell some, but you can get quite a few nice brushes. I got brushes that look like water drops, all kinds of different things. It's a whole class alone just Googling all these. So I found some splatter brushes to make it look like it, and I loaded them into Photoshop by going to the Photoshop and going to my Photoshop, my palettes for my brush palette. So I went to the brushes palette, I went to the options of the brush palette, and I can import brushes. Okay, and that's what I did, and I imported some brushes that look like the ones that look like bubbles, but that's not what we wanted to talk about. We wanted one to look like blood splashes. So I got the wrong brush. Here we go. There we go. And these are really huge brushes, which is nice. So I can resize them. You can kind of see right there. And so there, I made blood splatter. Something that would shoot against the tree. Okay. Okay, so that looks kind of nice. That's a nice piece of blood splatter right there. So there's two things you can do. If I actually save this as a Photoshop document, or if I download this from the web, it would come as a JPEG. Okay, and a JPEG would be black and white most likely. Okay. Let's just undo that. I think that's a nice looking splatter right there. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to just save this as a JPEG, and we'll import this, and I'll show you how to import the JPEG and use it for your blood splatter. And let's just go save. And we're going to save this in my folder that I've been saving all my the stuff I've been working on in this project, my folder. It's, again, when you, just like Premiere Pro, when you import items into After Effects, they do not come to After Effects. You just create a link between where the file is and the program, okay? And if you move that and break the link, you'll have a problem. You'll have to redo it. So file organization is really important, and I say that all the time. Splatter number 5. I have so many of them. Okay, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG, pretending I downloaded this from the web and I found it. Okay. And maximize compatibility. Maximize compression. I'll do 12, so I don't want to compress it at all. So 12 is like no compression of the JPEG. What I would do, and what I did, is I created a blank layer in Photoshop. I threw away my white background layer. You have to create a layer before you can delete the layer. And I just have a transparent one. And you can see I'm clicking a couple times because this brush has brush dynamics applied to it. That's a whole other thing. And it kind of fades in. It's smoothing. So it comes in soft, and then you hit it a couple times and you brighten up. So there's mine, and there's another one. So we'll save this one. I'll save this one as a Photoshop document. And I'll save it in the same spot, and we'll call this Blood Splatter 6. Okay. So one's a JPEG, one's a Photoshop document. The JPEG can't hold transparency. So I'm going to have to get rid of the make transparency in that, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Okay. The Photoshop document has transparency built right into it, so I don't have to worry about that. So if I go File, let's import those two files I just made. Command-I, File, Import, File, Command-I. And I'm looking for my AE folder. There it is right there. And I'm looking for Blood Splatter 5 and 6. Okay, and I want to import them as footage. I don't want them to come in their own timeline. I don't want to make a composition. I just want footage, just like film. So I click OK, and I'll grab the Photoshop document I made and I'll just throw it on there. And it's pretty big size. I made it HD, and this document is not HD. So first thing I need to do after I drop it into my window is resize it. Okay, we all know that everything that's in my timeline in After Effects has all these controls attached to them. So I just expand the layer. I have built-in transform. So I've got anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Just like Premiere Pro, you know, everything on the timeline has these basic attributes applied to it. Okay, and anything with a stopwatch in front of it can be animated over time. Okay, we're not going to be doing any animation over time with keyframing here, but we're going to scale. I want to scale this down so it fits. Let's just type in 50% right now and see what it looks like. And I'll just back out. Yeah, that looks pretty good. 50% did not a bad job. And, you know, that's a lot of blood. Let's just scale it down maybe a little bit more than 50%. That's not bad, you know, like I'm kind of, you know. And again, you know, if I take this side of my file and move it over to this side of my file, I've just flipped my document. There's lots of ways to do it. I have effects for flipping and various things, but you know, if you grab one side, you can just move it over to the other side, which in essence flipped it. Okay, so that looks, I think I like that. That's the blood I'm going to use right there. Okay, so Photoshop document, no problem. You know, you see I've got a lot of this stuff out here that I don't really need. I just want this part of it right here. So with the dynamic link, and since I've imported a Photoshop document, I can go back to Photoshop and take my eraser tool and then well, I know what I'm going to do even better. I'm going to take my selection tool, L, which is on my last Sue, and I'm just going to select. I'm going to zoom in first before I do that. I'm just going to select these pixels out here, these little spots. I don't want these. These ones are going in front of his face, so I'm going to just select them and delete them. I think I'll select maybe this one here and delete that one. And then deselect, save what I just did. If I go back to After Effects, you can see it should be updated. There you go. There you go. So I got rid of these. I didn't want those ones over here. So there's my blood. It doesn't look red, but it's blood. So I'm going to turn it red now. Okay, and I'm going to turn it red by using an effect. Okay, and there's a couple effects I can use. I'm going to use an effect called fill. And there we go. And I'll hit enter, and it gives me every effect that has fill applied to it. Okay, so I see I have one right here called fill, right there. So you can see I typed the word in fill into my presets for my effects, and it showed me all the ones with fill. Okay, so I'm just going to take this one and I'm going to drop it on top of my blood, and you can see it highlights. I could drop it on the layer, I can drop it on the clip, either one, same thing. Okay, I want to make sure I don't drop it on him though, and I want to make sure I drop it on the file I want, which is my splatter. So I release that and it fills it with a color. All the time in After Effects, you apply your effect from the effects preset. You can see all the effects, look at them all. Right? And then you come over to the other side to the effects control. It's always the same thing. You apply the effect, then you come to effects control and you alter the effect. A lot of effects don't do anything when you apply them until you actually alter the attributes. Some effects do lots of things and you have to figure out what it did and lower the attribute. So really what I want is just the color. I want like a darker color. I'm going to back out. I can choose the eyedropper tool and select the color from my screen if I want to import a color. I'll do that a little bit later. You can see how that works, but I want to just make it a darker red. So I'm just going to click there. I'm going to back out so you can see the effect. And I'm just going to pull it over here into that. Like a dark red. Okay, and this effect, and all effects are live. So I'm just picking this color now. It may not be the final color, but it's good enough for now. Okay, so that looks kind of nice. One other thing, let's just zoom in on this. You can see it's a flat color, okay? And really what I want to do is I want to apply in a blending mode. So I want to make it look like this blood is on the tree, not just floating in midair, okay? And blending modes are a great way of doing that. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose over here in my controls for my layers. We have multiple controls, okay? We have visibility, audio, soul, locking, label. I can actually do, this is my blending mode, this is my track matte, this is my parenting. And I have many more. If you come down to the bottom, let's just zoom in on that and let's come back. We have a couple buttons here. We have a button that expands or collapses, layer switches, transfer controls, and in and out points. Okay, I'm going to click these three buttons so you can see. We'll start with this, and we'll just come up here. Let's just see if we can do this. Sorry, I'm zooming all over the place. Okay, and you can see I've added more controls, my input boxes. Okay, and these are my time code boxes. So I go, there we go. There's my in and out points for the layer. Okay, I usually don't use those at the moment. I'll turn those off. But I like all my controls. Okay, soloing. This works with vector data, continuous raspering. This is the draft version of my thing. Any layer that has a special effect applied to it. This one, I've added the effect fill, so now it has a little FX next to it. This is working with any layers I want: frame blending, blurring, motion blur, adjustment layers, and 3D. Okay, these target the layers you want the effects, and then you turn the effects on over here. Okay. We're not going to be doing any of these features today, but I just want to show them to you. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to take my blending mode and I'm going to turn it to linear light. Let's see what that looks like. And you can see much more depth. I can see the highlights, the shadows underneath blending in, and that kind of looks nice. I kind of like that feature. Oops, let's go back to. Okay. So another thing sometimes I do to help blending, I may lower the opacity to 80% after I've added my blending mode. I think I like that. Okay. And there it is. So I got his blood splatter on the tree. You know, I think it could be the right spot. It could maybe over here, something like that. Okay. So let's back up. So I did that with a Photoshop document that had transparency built into it. Okay. If you choose something like the JPEG, JPEGs don't have transparency. Let's just throw that on there. Let's take it's scaling down. I'll just select that layer, and you know we have lots of effects. We've got anchor, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. And I can click on the layer, I can click on transform, and I can choose the effect I want. Or what we do is I hit S, brings up the scale attribute. P brings up position. A for anchor point. R for rotation. And T for transparency or opacity. All right. So I wanted scale, so I just hit S, and I'm going to do 50. Not 560, 50. Let's scale and see what it does. Okay, and you see, you know, it resized it, but I still got the white background. So what I would need to do is get rid of the background. There's a couple of tricks for getting rid of white and black. So if I go here to my modes, like I did linear light last, if I do multiply, it turns white transparent. And if I choose screen, it makes black transparent, which would be kind of nice. I could go, but the problem with that, if I chose multiply to make white transparent, I wouldn't be able to add my linear light blending mode, which is the next step. So this effect's not going to work this way. So I'm going to go to normal, and we have an effect. Obviously, we got effects to do everything, and I have effect, and it's called. I'm going to click in here to save me from searching. It's called Set Matte. Okay, and there it is. There, matte. Matting is like masking, hiding the black. So if I take the Set Matte effect, drop it on. I'll drop it on the layer just to make sure I get it. Right? There it is. Effects control pop up, and what I'm going to change, so it's not alpha channel. So my matte, an alpha channel would be like transparency in my Photoshop document. I don't have an alpha channel on this file, but what I do have is luminance. Luminance works with black and white. Okay, and you see with my luminance feature, you can see what happened. It made black transparent. Right? Black mask, white reveals. But I want it the other way. I want white transparent. So I'm going to just click over here in the invert and invert my selection. Invert my effect. So now white is transparent. And there's my black. Okay. Next thing I would do, and since I've already created these, I could just take this effect. Let's click on it. And this probably works better. Command C to copy, go to that layer, and Command V to paste. Okay, and then change the blending mode to linear light. There you go, just like that. And of course, the last time I flipped it just by grabbing the left side and dragging it over to the right side, or the right side dragging it to the left side. See that? You can easily flip your file. We have a flip effect inside After Effects. which does, it's called flip and flop, which does the same thing. Flip goes horizontal, and I think flop goes the other way, but you can just do it this way. Okay. All right. So we don't need that layer because we're going to use my Photoshop one. I'm going to take this and yeah. Okay. So we got the blood against the tree. Unfortunately, this gentleman, as I hit the play bar, you can see he goes in front of it. And the camera moves, and so the blood's flying around, floating in the air. Okay. And our goal in this lesson is to take the blood, stick it on the tree, and put it behind his head. You know, it's supposed to be on the tree, so when his head goes down like this and covers up the blood, we need to see it. Okay. So the first thing we're going to take care of is the motion. Okay. Is the motion. Okay. And this is one of After Effects' great features. It's called track motion. Okay. And I'm going to track the motion of the camera. Or, well, of the video file. I don't really have a camera on here. That's another lesson. All right. So I'm going to track the motion of that. And of course, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So we have a workspace to track motion. Okay. Our workspaces are up here in the top right-hand corner. You can see we have multiple ones. We have our default, learn, standard, small screen, libraries, and extras. Effects is where I always like to work. We got animation, essential graphics, color, and various ones. Okay. But what we want to talk about today is motion tracking. We're going to go through all these and work into the different workspaces. But right now, we're working in motion tracking. So I click motion tracking, and it brings up the motion tracking dialog box. So, okay. So I'm going to track motion, but before I track motion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a new layer. Okay. And the reason why I'm going to apply this new layer, and it's going to be a null layer. Okay, so I'm going to create a new, this is even before I start my tracking, because what I want to do, I want to track the blood. I want to add my tracking to the blood so the blood moves with the camera. But I also plan to add other things I want to track with the movement also. I think I'm going to put a bullet hole up here and some other things. So I could add the tracker and track the blood to the motion, but I'm going to use what they call a null object. So I'm going to go to my layer menu, layer, new, and I'm going to create what they call a null object. So it's a layer that resides there, but it doesn't, you don't view it, you can't see it, but I can apply effects to it, or tracking and various motion distort effects, and then I can link layers to that null object so that they take over the effects. That way, if I'm going to apply it to a null object, what I can do is add it to apply different things to my tracking. So most of the times, a lot of times, when I'm using multiple layers or multiple things that are moving around, or I want to distort or track, is I create a null object. Okay. And here's my null object. It's called null 3. And when I track this motion, I'm going to add it to the null object. And then I'm going to parent the blood to the null object, and then the bullet hole to the null object. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So to get into the tracking, so of course I went to tracking workspace. You didn't see that. We got all kinds of workspace, but we have one that relates specifically to motion tracking. Okay. So motion tracking, and that's what we're going to track, and that's what we're going to work. And of course, so if I come here, I'm motion tracking. Of course, what I want to track, which is important, is my movie layer, right? My little Indiana Jones here. So I'm going to come over here to the tracking palette to show you the tracking palette. We can track various things. Camera, we don't have a camera here, so we're not going to track that. I can do my warp stabilizer, stabilize motion, and track motion. I'll show you these other 3 options later on. But what we're going to do today, we're going to track motion. We're going to track the motion of the movie file and apply it to the blood so the blood will stick on the tree. So if I go track motion, and I had the blood layer selected, so automatically chose the blood layer. This is going to be tracker number 1. It's going to be a transform tracker. I'm going to track rotation and scale. Okay, I want to make sure I get everything. You can see my motion target is my Photoshop file. I chose the file on top. I don't want that. I want to choose, I'm going to edit target, and I guess I come over here to the edit target window, and I'm going to choose the layer null. Okay, that's where I want to put the tracking motion to the null. It's going to be applied to the blood sooner or later, but I want to apply it to this null object. Okay, there I am there. Let's just come over here up to my thing. So I've done that. So I've tracked camera, I've tracked the motion source, and I applied it to null. Okay, so now I have to set up my tracking points. I'm going to click options first, and then we'll just back out and I'll just show you what the options are. So I have 2 tracking points there. You can see, there they are right there. Okay. These are my tracking points. Okay, I'll show you how they work. But what I want to talk about first is what I'm tracking. So I'm tracking not the red, green, blue channels or the color. I'm not color, difference of color. I'm luminance. So what I'm looking for is a pixel that is a difference between light and dark. Okay, if I had like just one red pixel, or I could just track that across the screen. But you know, what I'm tracking is luminance. So the difference between light and dark pixels. Okay, so, and that's what I'm going to do. Okay. There we go. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to track that. These features, what I can do is I can actually stop tracking if my confidence falls below 80%. I can use the adapt feature on every frame, so it'll stop each frame and help me adapt it. I can actually use my continue tracking after I'm done. But we're not going to use that. Okay. If you have problems tracking, you may want to come in and play with these features, but we'll check our tracking first. So what I'm looking for is luminance. So what I'm looking for is light and dark pixels to track. And since I've done this file multiple times, I know I have a couple here already. And right here, I have a knock in the tree, and there's a nice, beautiful dark pixels right next to light pixels. Okay. And over here, and over here somewhere, let's just move that out of the way. I have a little light pixel right there next to dark pixels. See that? So those are my 2 tracking points. And I have 2 tracking points because I chose position, rotation, and scale. If I just had one, it would just give me 1 tracking point. And they're connected, so it's going to work with the rotation and the scale. Okay, so before I track, we've got 2 boxes, but really 3 things going on there. And I've got 3 different icons, okay? You can see I have, I'll just zoom in on this. I have my black arrow with the crosshairs, which moves the tracking point. I have the white arrow, which moves the tracking box. And I have the black arrow, which resizes the tracking. This is the track area. This is the track spot. Okay. So it all depends what you're going to do. You want to make sure you have the right. So you got, the tracker has 3 different controls, right? That one moves the box. The black arrow resizes. The black arrow with the crosshairs moves the tracking point. Okay. So what I'm looking for is this black pixel right there. See that? Right next to light pixels. See that? So that looks like, whoops. I think I went too far when I released my mouse. There you go. So that looks like a great point to track. My tracking area, I can actually just kind of move it over here so it follows that amount of area. You want to just make sure it's got all the information that you want. Mine does already. Whoops. There we go. And I'll just take this, let's move this over here. Okay. And I can maybe make it a little bit bigger. Okay, then I'm going to take this tracking box. Of course, I wait until I get the black arrow and the crosshairs, and I'm going to track this white spot right there, this light spot next to dark spots. Okay, luminosity. Okay, so I picked my 2 tracking points. I'm going to back out a bit. What's important with my 2 tracking points is that my guy doesn't cover them up. The tracking points don't get covered up, and his hat just missed that one, and they don't leave the screen, and they're both there, you can see. Okay, my tracking points are moving with the camera because I haven't set up tracking yet. Okay, and at the very first frame, I have my tracking point selected. So when I track, I'm going to track forward because I'm at the first frame. If I was at the last frame finding my tracking points, I would track backwards. If I had a hard time tracking, I may track 1 frame at a time. But this should work really well. Okay, so I've set my 2 tracking points. It's going to track the blood movie. It's going to put the tracking motion onto my null object. Okay, I'm tracking motion, position, rotation, and scale. I'm just going to back up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to track forward because I'm at the beginning of my clip and I want to go forward. So I'm going to just back up so you can see what happens. I have my 2 tracking points selected and I hit analyze forward. And there it is. It went relatively quickly. And if you zoom in here, you can see the keyframes. There's my motion. And what's nice is that the trackers are still on the right spot at the very end of the clip, okay? So you can see their motion path. See that? Beautiful. Okay. So as I mentioned before, I have the null object as my target for my tracking information. So when I come over here and you can see we have an apply button. When I click the apply button, I'll just back out, show you what happens. I click the apply button. I'm going to apply X and Y. That's my choice. You got X or Y. I always choose X and Y. Even if I'm only going 1, I give it both just to make sure it works. And there we go. And you can see what happened now. You can see now my tracking box has been lined up. The registration point of my tracking box is now lined up with the enter point. And when I move, you can see the tracking box disappears. The null object disappears. Okay. You can see the multitude of keyframes created by my tracking. Okay. And I've got so much because I had 2 trackers. Okay. Tracker 1 and tracker 2. And these are the keyframes, and you can see it applied them to the null object. Okay, great. All right, so that worked really well. I'm just going to close off these layers. I don't like to see them anymore. I'm just going to bring this down here a little bit more. Okay, so we have tracking, but now what I want to do is I actually want the blood to track. Okay, so I'm coming over here to my controls for my composition, and you can see here's the blood movie, here's the null object, here is the blood. Okay, and what I have here is parenting. So what I have is the blood, and what I want to do, this is a Pickwick. You know, what I can do, I'll just go to the parent. So I just click here, I can click here, and I say I want it to parent the null object. So my blood is going to move with the null object. The other thing I could do, I could just take the Pickwick and just click on the null object. It does the same thing. The Pickwick, these little circles. Okay, we'll be using those multiple times or another couple times in class, and I'll show you how they work. Okay, so let's see what happens now. If I hit there, look at that. Beautiful. So the blood is now being tracked. And beautiful. It's staying right on the tree. It kind of looks like it should. Okay. What's the problem is that it's in front of him and he goes over top of it. Okay. So that's not going to work. So we'll fix this up. So there we go. So what we're going to do now, I want to put the blood behind him. That's the goal. And I'll tell you how I'm going to do that. I'm going to duplicate my movie layer, my guy here, and that's Control D to duplicate. You can go to the File menu, edit menu. You know, I love my keyboard commands. Where's duplicate? Sorry, I apologize. Edit, the edit menu, duplicate, Command D. So I forget where it is, and splitting the layer, Shift Command D. Okay, we've done that a couple times. So Command D. Command D is duplicate. So now I have two movies of this guy, and I'm going to take the duplicated one and I'm going to throw it on top, move it up to the top of the pile, layers palette. Okay. I'll zoom. See, I just did that. I duplicated it. It was there, and I moved it up. You can see the little blue line shows you where it's going to go. So I want to go right on top, so you can see the blue lines there. I release my mouse, and I got another movie on top. So this movie obviously is covering up my blood splatter. So what I need to do is create a mask. Mask out this layer so I can reveal the layer underneath, which is the blood layer. Okay. And I just, of course, I want to mask out everything but him. He has to stay here. Okay. And you can see he moves. Oh, let's see how he's going to move. And he covers up my blood quite a bit. But I'm going to make a mask. Okay. And so I'm going to make actually 3 masks. Because from my experience in doing this multiple times and over the years, I find it easier to control one. I'm going to do a mask just of his jacket, one of his head, one of his hat. Okay, because they all move a little bit differently, and I find it's going to be easier for me to create the mask this way. Okay, I take my vector drawing tool, the pen tool, and I select the layer. If no layer is selected, and we know if we use the drawing tools, we end up making vector shapes. Okay, that have a stroke and a fill. That's all controlled by your options bar up here. Okay, right, I can give it a different color fill. You can do what you want, you know. But I don't. That's not what we're going to do. We're not making shapes or a shape layer. What we're going to do is we're going to use the same drawing tools, but to create a mask. So if I take the same drawing tool and I have the layer selected, what it's going to do when I click, it's going to create a layer mask. And I'm just going to draw with the pen tool. And you click, you drop an anchor point, you drag what they call a Bezier handle. Okay. You go back, you can go up here to the next handle, and there. And then we'll just go over to this shoulder and down. And this side doesn't actually, this side doesn't affect the blood, so I'm not really worried about this side. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the beginning, because you always have to close your shape. Okay, you can't have an open shape. So you see it's open now because I got my anchor point here. You always have to go back to the beginning anchor point. You can see the beginning anchor point looks different than the other anchor point. See, it's got like it's a double square. Okay, and you notice when I go over the first anchor point, my pen tool gets a little circle next to it, and that lets me know I'm going to close my path. And then now it turns to a mask. While it's open, it's not a mask. Okay, you must close the path to create the mask. Okay, so let's back out of our layer. So if I come over here to my controls, you'll see what I have now on this layer is my mask. Okay, there's my motion trackers. I applied to it. There's my mask. I open up my mask. There's the mask. Okay, mask 1. As you can see, mask 1. I'm going to create a couple more masks. So I'm going to create another mask around his head. Click, drag. And I want to put a few anchor points here because I want to make sure I have enough controls. And I'll go back to the beginning. There we go. I masked the face now, and I have 2 masks now on my layer. I'm going to go back, and now I'm going to do the hat. And I'm just trying to create a selection. All right. There, I've created 3 masks. They're not perfect, mind you. You can see they don't follow the shape perfectly. But I got the anchor points where I want them. Okay. Now I'm going to choose my selection tool, which is V on my keyboard. And I'm going to fine tune my mask. So I'm going to click here for this anchor point. It gives me the Bezier handles. I can move my Bezier. I want to just follow the shape of his coat. And I think this anchor point should be removed there, I think. And this one down. So by moving the angle and the length of your anchor point, or your Bezier handles, you can recreate every path. Okay? That's what the French mathematician Bezier said and stated when he created these. And of course, they had them created back in the 18th century, long before we had vector drawing tools to use the feature that he selected. But you can see by the angle of the path, the length of the path, you can create almost any shape. All right, so now to follow the jacket. Okay, there we go. So blood. So what I have to do now, though, is I'm on the first frame. I'm on the first frame, and I'm on the very first frame and on the layer of my duplicated blood layer. And I hit MM on my keyboard, because what MM does, it brings up the mask and all the mask attributes. Okay, and what I need to do, and what I'm going to do, is animate mask path. Okay, so I'm going to click the little stopwatch. We know anything with a stopwatch in front of it can be animated over time. Okay, and what's going to be animated over time is the shape of my mask, because it's going to move with him as he moves across the screen. My mask is going to animate also. So I've turned on animation on frame 1 where I'm at here, and it's keyframed. Okay, okay. So any alteration I do at any anchor point, that is, it'll add another keyframe for me. Okay, so I've enabled it, so I don't have to worry about this anymore. I don't have to click the keyframe button, because anytime I animate or move my selection, it will it'll add a keyframe. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do, and of course this is called rotoscoping, and I'm going to move ahead 1 keyframe at a time and make my mask go. I'm just trying to put my cursor between the 2 layers just to bring these down. There we go, so I can see the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to go to frame 2, and you can see it's moved, right? So I'm just going to fix the mask a bit. Click here, and there you go. That looks pretty good. We don't need to worry about that. Let's move that up here for now. There we go. Go down to the next frame. So what I'm doing is I'm going down frame at a time and making sure my selection follows the movement of his jacket and covers up the red, the blood. So I'll go to the next frame and up here a little bit more. There. Take this keyframe in. And you know, this is monotonous and it takes a long time, but this is computer graphics. This is After Effects. You know, we have a rotoscoping feature which let us do this automatically, but it doesn't always work. And you have to learn how to place and edit keyframes and anchor points. Okay, it's just something you need to learn, and this is a good lesson to learn it. So as I'm going along, I'm making sure my path follows the jacket. Okay. I don't want any blood on the jacket, and I don't want to mask out any blood that's not because of the jacket. And take this point in a little bit more. Okay, go to the next frame. And off we go. And I'm going to make you watch me do all this. This could take a while, but you need to know. I don't need to worry about down here anymore because I'm just worried about the blood. Actually, it's the only thing I'm worried about masking out. Um, and I don't want the blood on his jacket. That's very important. Okay. Next frame. Okay. Big movement here. And so we'll come down here, over here. Take this to this keyframe. Take that down to this keyframe. So what I'm going to need to do, yeah, is that going to work? Yeah. Up a little bit. Oops, I want that to cover that shoulder. I want this one to cover here. Okay. I'll just take this guy over here. Even though it doesn't matter, I want to keep moving along with the other ones. Okay, I need to move his face now. I'm going to just do that. I'm going to just double click it twice. And I can move it all as one object. Okay? Because it's not really covering up anything. And of course, I need to double click to get rid of that transform box. And then I can. So if you see now, all my anchor points are selected because they're square. If I click away, they're now all circular, meaning I can go back and I can select one at a time. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing to his hat. Double click on it to get it and move it all at once. And then double click inside to get rid of that. Click to deselect. And then now I can reselect. So I'm going to just, because I want to make sure his hat's perfect, because his hat's going to be affecting my blood any second now. Let's just move these up here. Let's move this over here like that. There. And I don't know if you noticed, but I have most of my anchor points on corners. I don't have them on the curve, because what makes curve better is the path, not an anchor point. So I have an anchor point at the beginning and the end of the curve, and then use the motion, the path, the vector path to make the curve. As you can see here, if I do this on the hand, see, it's much easier than, to use the path to make these curves than try to use anchor points. Okay. But we don't really worry about that because there's no blood. Okay, and let's go back to, so I think this is probably the last frame. All right. And you can see, there we go, we've got, there we go. Let's back out. That's my whole tracking of my mask. Let's just click in the gray area to deselect everything. Up down here in the gray area. Okay. Hit home. There you go. All right. I'm just going to close these off. What's happening though is my blood showing up before the guy gets shot. So I move my plate along. You can see right there. So probably right there he's shot. That's why he's moving. So right there, that's where the blood is going to show up. So I'm going to stop the blood so it doesn't show up until then. And we go home, you can see. And as I'm moving along, oh yeah, look at that. These two frames are, that one's not bad. That frame, this frame right here, my mask doesn't look right. So I'm just going to zoom in on that and fix my mask. There we go. Move that over here a little bit more. Take this down. Whoops. There we go. And then the next frame, yeah, that's good. Previous frame. Okay, and if I come down to this window right here, you can see this little button right there. That turns off my selection for a second, just so I don't have to look at it. All right. There we go. What's that? Let's turn this mask on. Ah, there's another one there. Let's just get that off of here. That in here. There we go. Okay, right here you can see in between my frames, I'm having some problems. There we go. We got a little bit of movement going on already. Let's just take this, move that to there, bring that to here. All right. Okay. So I'm just fine tuning my mask. That's one thing nice about, all this work. It's all live, so I can come back and fine tune it. It's not like I painted something and it's done. Okay. I'm just clicking in between my frames now, just as I said, fine tune. I don't know how much time I'm spending on this, but the more you spend, the better it looks. So we got, there we go. Yeah, not bad. Okay, let's hit home again. Let's zoom out so I can see this. Click in the gray spot to deselect everything. Okay. So the next thing I do is I want some blood to shoot out of his arm because he got shot. Okay, I don't know if it's going to come out or not. You know, I've never seen anybody get shot in real life, only in the movies. So we'll see what happens. We'll pretend what we think. So what I think, I got this Bloodburst movie, and it's, I'm just going to throw that on there. It's a big size, and you can see what it is. It's just Bloodburst. A little bit too big, mind you. So I'm just going to hit S to bring up scale. I'll just scale it to 50% for now until I decide. I can always move my corner anchor points to free transform. I think I'm going to shrink her down even more. And let's see what this looks like. So, you know, he's going to get shot. Right there, that's when he gets shot because you can feel it. Right, and into the shoulder right there. Okay. Right there. So you see, that's about as long as I want that to last. I'm going to make that disappear after that. Okay? First thing I'm going to do, you can see, I don't know how good your eyes are, but got a sharp edge right there. You see that? So I'm going to fix that up by masking. I'm going to take my rectangle selection tool, come over here to my file, and I'm just going to make a little mask there. Right? And it's gone. So that is my mask over here, my mask palette. You can see it's an additive mask. I'm going to turn it into a subtractive mask, and then I want to feather the edge of my mask to make it nice and soft there, instead of that hard edge. So there we go. All right. I also want to do some transparency, some opacity. So I'm going to hit T on my keyboard because I want this. It's going to. So right about there, I want it to be at 100%. Of course, it's always at 100%. And I think by the time it gets to frame 10, I want it to disappear. So now it's going to fade out. Okay, so now, oops. And doesn't that look like it goes across his face? There, it should be gone by now. So if I hit here, it is gone. So it doesn't go on his face, it's just there. Okay. And I can take this, and this blood, I want it to kind of match the same color, still a little bit bright. So I'm going to go over here to my window. I'm going to go to my effects category. There we go. And I'm just going to type in an effect that I want to apply to my blood to make it look darker. And that effect is levels. Okay. Levels. So let's just go drop levels on top of here. And I'm just going to darken it up by bringing my mid-tone slider over to the lighter area. There you go. It's happening. We have the blood on the tree. It's just showing up though. I want to actually make it look like it's being splurted on the tree. And I'm going to do that with a masking effect. Okay, let's go back. Let's go to the beginning of my blood, which is right there. I'm on the blood layer. Okay, my splatter Photoshop layer. And how I'm going to make this look like it splatters on is I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to make an elliptical mask. So I grab my elliptical selection tool. I have my splatter layer selected. And when I make a little selection, it's going to create a little mask, a little oval mask. Okay. And here I'm on the blood splatter layer on my mask. And we have, I'm just going to hit MM on the keyboard. Whoops, sorry. MM on the keyboard to bring up my mask. Because I'm going to show you the effect I'm going to use. And of course, I can reshape my mask. I can animate the shape of my mask. I can animate the feather of my mask. And I'm going to, maybe I'll feather it maybe 5 pixels. Okay. My opacity of the mask, but really what is the expansion of my mask. And watch this. Hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to zoom in on this. This is not going to work. I can't do both. So I can't see it and then zoom in on it. So I'm going to come over here and you can see what happens when I expand my mask. See that? Animation. I can give it a negative so it goes down to a little tiny dot, and there's my animation. There's my blood splatter. And it's created by expanding my mask. Okay. So right here at the very, I'm going to get right at the very beginning where my blood starts. I'm going to click a keyframe for my mask expansion. It has a negative value of 21. You can see it's a little bit smaller. Whoops. Let's zoom in. Bring over here. All right, let's zoom out. Okay. Sorry. Let's do it this way. My trackpad is losing control. Okay, there we go. And so there's my effect. So let's say, yeah, I'd say it's got to come out at least within 2 frames. So let's take the expansion out here and let's do it. There you go. Okay. I'm going to select these 2 keyframes because I want to give them an easy ease. So it builds up and slows down. Now let's see what that looks like. There, so now the blood looks like it's being splattered against the tree with my mask. Okay. I can spread these out a little bit more. Stop that, hit the space bar to stop. I can spread these 2 keyframes out a little bit more. I'll deselect one. Maybe take it to there, see what that does. I think that looks good. Okay, so we got the blood shooting out of him. We've masked it all. You know, we could probably darken the blood up a little bit. I think if I come back to my splatter, let's go to the color. Let's just choose a little darker red. Ooh, I don't. Well, let's see what that looks like. No, that's a little bit too dark. Well, you, you know, I don't know what blood looks like. I know it looks like in Hollywood, but I'm not too sure. There we go. We'll just leave that. There we go. Okay. So now that I've set this up and I have tracking and everything already applied to here, I can use tracking for something else. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bullet hole in this tree. And I've purchased this collection of video files they're called Action Essentials, and they have lots of blood spurts. You can see the blood. They have all kinds of different things. They got splatters and all kinds of stuff. I can, you know, animate splatters. You can see that. So there's a pre-canned one. I could actually just animate that one on there. and turn it red. That's not bad. Okay, but I got all kinds of these things. And what I'm looking for now is textures, and I got bullet holes. Let's go to bullet holes. And that's not bad. We'll pretend that's part of a tree, I guess. You know. Yeah, we'll pretend that one. We'll use that one. Okay? So, depending on what you do and what your career goes, you may want to purchase some effects. They can save you a lot of time. I have a lot of explosions. You'll see some. You'll saw them from our first class. I have explosions. And the ones I bought, they're all been pre-matted. So they got pre-canned transparency in them. So I don't have to worry about that. They've been pre-matted. They were all done on green screen and pre-matted for me. So that saves a lot of time. So all I do is just take my bullet hole and I just take it not from the view screen, but from the library and just drop it in my project pane. But I got to bring my project pane up for that to work. It won't go to my effects panel, but it'll go to my project pane. There you go. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bullet hole and drop it on the tree. Okay. Looks way too big. Let's take my selection tool, not my drawing tool, and I'll just shrink her down. Holding the shift key while I do that will constrain proportions. I think I'm just going to rotate it for some reason. I think it looks better. Whoops. Make sure you rotate the right layer thing. There we go. There. Okay. I'm going to zoom in on this for a second so you can see it. If I hit, well, that's not going to work. I'm going to zoom in on this so you can see it, because what I'm going to do, I want to tint it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this nice feature. I want to make it look like it's part of that tree. So I'm on this layer, selected. I'm going to take this filter and I'm going to take this effect called tint. Tint. And I'm going to take the tint filter effect. I'm going to drop it on my little wood. And what I'm going to do, it lets me tint the shadows and the highlights. So I want all the blacks to be this dark brown color. Okay. And I want all the lights to be that color. All right. That may work nicely. Let's just take my highlights, maybe move them around a bit, maybe that color. All right, so let's select that again. And I think maybe I'm going to choose something a little bit darker. There we go, for my highlights. And yeah, maybe even a little darker. And my highlights, maybe something even a little bit brighter. Okay, so there is my bullet hole. I'm going to back out again, 200%, so we can kind of see. And of course, my bullet hole is going to show up when everybody starts firing. There we go, but my bullet moves. But we've solved that because we have a null object that right there. I'm going to parent my bullet hole to my null object, and it was called null number 3. I could just take the Pickwick and drag it over to null number 3, or I could just choose it here. Okay, so now the bullet hole stays right where it's supposed to. There we go. And let's maybe let the bullet hole come 2 frames before the other one. So he got shot twice. Once missed, hit the tree, the other one landed on him. All right. And I'm not too sure about my coloring of my thing, but that's not bad. You know, I think I made it too dark. Let's just come over here for that color. Oh, that's too bright. Let's see. Yeah. There we go. So that's one feature about using a null object for an effect, like my tracking. So it's easy for me to apply all, you know, anything else I want to move along. You know, I could carve a heart into the tree and have it move with that, but I'm just going to do that. All right. So what I need here, you see the mask I made on Indiana Jones here, my character here. If I select the layer and I hit U, it shows me all the keyframes. Okay, it's got my tracking keyframes plus my masking keyframes. Okay, and you know, when I first did it, you know, I was going every 2 frames. Okay, you know, just to speed up the process. But you know, when I review it, you got to look at every frame to see how it goes. Okay, you know, I put one every 2 frames, but when I go back to review, we want every, you know, you want to review every frame. Okay. But then if you're lucky enough, your motion between the 2 frames will move with his head, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. So I like, you know, I jump ahead 2, sometimes 4 frames, depending on the motion, how quickly my subject's moving. But you always have to go back and review it every frame. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my move layer. I'm going to hit MM to bring up all the, and I want to select my 3 mask. I hold down the command key, and I just want to go to the feather, and I'm going to feather the mask maybe by 3 pixels, just to soften it up a bit. Okay. Again, I like turning off the mask so I can review it while it's still selected. Yeah. You not maybe not notice that, but yeah, I'm just softening up the mask. Okay. And there's one always, whenever I'm working in After Effects, I'm just working on a project. You know, if this is part of a movie or a scene, I'm going back into Premiere. You know, I would do all my color correction in Premiere. But you know, sometimes I like doing, if I'm just creating something right in After Effects, so there's a nice way to colorize things. And it's a quick and easy way. I'm just going to do that here. You know, I create a layer on top of all the other layers, layer new, a new solid layer. And I like picking, you know, a greeny gray or a, you know, or bluey gray, depending on that, you know, and giving a layer filled with this color. And when I create a new layer, you know, I get options of the size of the layer, my pixel aspect ratio, and of course, it always matches my last one. You can click make comp size, and that's already what it was doing, and to make sure that it matches. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to click OK, and I got this color, and it's, you know, it's kind of a weird green color, but I'm going to, of course, take this to the top layer. I'm just going to move it up to the top. There we go. And I'm going to go to its mode, its blending mode, and I'm going to change something maybe like soft light. You know, overlay sometimes. Now that didn't look good. One that I like using, I use quite a bit, is called color. And I would take that, then I would open up the opacity or the transparency and take that, you know, down to maybe 20. Okay, and you can see the look it gives it. You know, it gives it a more, takes that, it cools it down, gives it a more motion picture kind of look. You know, I can change the color. It could be any color. But you know, that's just something, a quick fix I do. You know, you can throw it in, put it in a color blending mode, or any of the other ones. You know, They all do something different. I like color to colorize. I like soft light. Does a nice effect, and you can bring the opacity up a little bit more with soft light. So I'm going to put that back in the color blending mode. Put the opacity there, somewhere like that. And I use this feature a lot when I bring in different subjects from different parts of a, two different scenes shot differently. You can pull the colors together by doing this. All right. Now I'm done.